Today, it is a signal honor and an enormous pleasure to ask you to join me in welcoming our distinguished guest. I thought of 4 words to describe him. And when I think of him, I think first of the word service. Our Governor General has served students and faculty at a number of fine universities across the country: Queen's, Toronto, Western, McGill, Waterloo. And today, he has most generously accepted to join us in welcoming you to your academic year and your academic career. So, welcome to Carleton. I know you saved the best for last, Governor General. His Excellency has also served on numerous corporate boards. For example, he served on the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, the Neuroscience National Center of Excellence, the Information Highway Advisory Council, the Blue Ribbon Panel on Smart Communities, the Advisory Committee on Online Learning, the Committee on Canadian Information Systems and the Environment, and the National Broadband Task Force. You can see that he has truly merited the next 2 words that I'm going to mention. He is very hardworking and multifaceted. Not only has he done all of that, but he's the author of 20 books. He was twice named to the All-American Hockey Team, and he's in Harvard University's Athletic Hall of Fame. That's pretty multifaceted. He's a well-known specialist in securities regulation, corporate law, labor law, but he's also known to skate 7 kilometers or more on the canal on blustery Sunday mornings, and so now you'll recognize him when you see him. Our Governor General is definitely a man of extraordinary vision. He's led institutions, boards, and Canadian agencies to achieve a truly great measure of success. If I attributed the rise of the Waterloo region to him, he would probably say, oh, it was just teamwork. If I attributed McGill's international standing to his efforts, he would say he simply built on the foundation he was given. If I said he was a great teacher, he would give credit to his own teachers. Beyond his vision, his hard work, and his service, the Governor General is a truly modest individual who merits thereby in even greater measure our admiration and gratitude for having agreed to share his morning with us and share his inspirational message with us. Please rise and join me in giving a Carleton welcome to our Governor General.
Thank you. Thank you. Chancellor Gray, President Runte, Madam Chair, deans, members of the faculty, staff, and students, how wonderful to be with you on this first day. Roseanne, I'll remember that wonderful introduction for being so generous, and I'll particularly retain that word modesty. That's a great lesson. Winston Churchill once had remarked in front of him about Clement Attlee, who was his successor, the statement, Mr. Attlee is a very modest man, and Churchill replied, Mr. Attlee has a great deal to be modest about. Je suis ravi d'être ici parmi vous pour le premier jour de votre journée ici à Carleton. It's wonderful to be with you. There's such a sense of excitement as you begin this journey. I must tell you that I was looking forward to this enormously, to be with you, until I asked my great friend Roseanne for a little advice on what I should say. And she said, oh, well, you know, just speak about what you want to speak about and be short, warm, and inspiring. And when she uttered those 3 words, terror struck my heart, because I went back to my very first couple of months at McGill, where I was a very young president or principal, and we had the first of many budget cuts. We put the group together to come up with some imaginative ideas, and one could only have occurred in Quebec in 1979. Quebec Hydro at that time was offering substantial capital grants and operating subsidies if institutions would move from non-electrical using appliances to electrical using appliances, and in a stroke of genius, we decided to replace all of the paper hand drying machines in the washrooms of the university with electric hand dryers, thus helping to decimate the forest industry of Canada. But to my great surprise, this instruction was carried out, and a week later I go out for an inspection tour, and the first building is the engineering building, and I go in the men's washroom, and there's this wonderful electrical hand drying machine up on the wall, white as can be, but already some graffiti has been inscribed above the depressor button, and the graffiti read, "Press this button for a short, warm, inspiring message from your principal." And I turned my back, and lo and behold, on the other side of the room was an equally shining new electric hand-drying machine. And above the depressor button, it read, "Poussez ce bouton pour un message court, chaleureux et inspirant de votre recteur. Merci." And isn't this wonderful? McGill engineers are not only bilingual, they're polite. I especially like the merci part. I've loved the university. I loved it so much that I went at age 18 from a little town in northern Ontario, and at age 69 and a half, I decided it was time I better get a real job, and I was asked if I would do this job, and all 5 of my daughters are in public service. I say all the important things in life I've learned from my children, so I thought it was time, 1, to follow them in public service, and 2, to do a real job. But the university is part of my soul, and ever it shall be. And I hope this university will be part of your souls, because it is such a special place. For nearly 70 years, Carleton has stood as a great center of learning and innovation. Its alumni, and you heard Roseanne speak of several of them, have spread out across the country and the world, lending their skills to business, arts, science, and public affairs, so many different endeavors. Carleton alumni even contribute to the Governor General's office each and every day. We have a wonderful group of people there, some of them your graduates. No matter where they are, all graduates utilize what they learn here to benefit so many. Now, today your focus is on the next week and the next year at Carleton, and that's appropriate. But think ahead to a milestone for Canada, our 150th anniversary, which we will celebrate in 2017. It will also be Carleton's 75th anniversary. I've been asking Canadians to think of the kind of country we want to be in 2017, our 150th anniversary. And the theme has been a smart and caring nation, a call to service. Smart and caring, both of those adjectives are important. And to ask ourselves, what is the gift we can make to Canada in our 150th birthday as our contribution to this nation which has made it so possible for so many of us to develop our talents and to give back by thinking about how we make our place, our country, even smarter and more caring. As a university president, I used to love greeting first-year students, and I would often tell them a story. I call it the jar story, and I want to tell it now because it, I think, may help you as you think of your months ahead and your life ahead. The story goes this way. A professor, it could be first-year psychology, it could be economics, it could be anthropology, it could be chemistry, whatever, meets the class for the first day, and good morning, class, good morning, sir, and he reaches in the drawer and he holds up a jar that seems to be empty, nothing in it, and he says, "Is this jar empty or full?" "Well, it's empty, sir." And then he reaches in the first drawer and he pulls out an envelope that has some rocks in the envelope. He puts them in the jar up to the top. "Empty or full?" "It's full now, sir." Second drawer, an envelope's got some pebbles in. Shakes them into the drawer. "Empty or full now?" "It's really full now, sir." Third drawer, an envelope with some sand in it. Pours the sand in up to the top. "Empty or full now?" "Well, it's really full now, sir." And then he reaches to the very bottom of the desk and he pulls out a can of Diet Coke and he pours that in up to the top. "Empty or full?" "Really full now, sir." And then he pauses and says, "Well, why did I do that?" He says, "Well," he said, "when I held that jar up at first, you said it was empty." "Well, it was empty in the sense that there was no solid material or no liquid material that you could see, but it was filled with air. So it was filled in one sense and empty in another. And then when I put the rocks in, you said it was full, but there was room for the pebbles. I put the pebbles in, there was room for the sand, etc. So it was either full or empty depending upon the assumption you brought to bear, depending upon the information you brought to your question, the presumptions you made." He says that's a lesson in critical thinking. Think about those assumptions when you ask a particular question. But he said, I have more important lessons even than the lesson of critical thinking. He said, look at that jar as your own life. In a sense, it's empty. In a sense, it's full. You're young. You're starting on a new adventure, first day in university. The rocks, he says, are the really important things in your life. It's your own sense of self-confidence. It's your own respect for your family. It's the values that you bring with you that provide your moral compass. Those are the friendships, those are the associations that are really important things in your life. That speaks to your soul. The pebbles, well, the pebbles are getting your assignments done on time. If you're part of a group project, pulling your weight, not leaving it to someone else. If you have a part-time job, showing up on time. Doing things in a responsible fashion, doing your duty. The sand, well, that's just stuff. That's hanging out. That's just there. And what I want you to understand is it's important to get the rocks in your jar first and then the pebbles. And don't fill it up with sand because you missed the really essential things. And then, good professor that he is, he stopped and he waited for a minute and 2 minutes, and finally a daring girl at the back of the room said, "Sir, what about the can of Diet Coke?" He said, "Well, that's just a reminder there's always time to sit down and have a cool drink with a good friend." Ce sont vous, les étudiants d'aujourd'hui, qui auraient un impact considérable sur notre avenir. La générosité, la créativité et l'ingéniosité de notre population sont les plus grandes richesses de notre pays. Depuis des générations, les Canadiens font des découvertes qui changent le monde et se donnent sans compter pour le bien d'autrui, améliorant ainsi le monde autour. Maintenant, c'est à votre tour de laisser votre empreinte sur le Canada, de susciter le changement et d'édifier un pays dont nous continuerons d'être fiers. Whatever you study and wherever Carleton takes you, I cannot wait to see how you will help to create a smarter, more caring nation where we can all work together for the common good. Let me just close by sharing 3 pieces of advice and a little story. I love to tell stories to illustrate things that are important to me. These are pieces of advice that may help you accomplish any goal you may have. First of all, learning and learning how to learn. I cannot stress enough that learning occurs over a lifetime, and we pursue knowledge wherever we can and wherever we are. In fact, I think I'm more of a learner today than I ever have been, and how refreshing and wonderful it is to get up every morning with that mind open, ready to learn. I often say minds like parachutes work best when open. One of my first discoveries in the open mind was very shortly after the time that where you are now. I think I was in my 5th week as a freshman and undergraduate student at Harvard. I'd gone to a small high school in Sault Ste. Marie in Northern Ontario, and I'd done very well on the province-wide final examinations in history because there was one text, one book for the course. And I don't have a photographic memory, but I have a good memory, and I'd read it a number of times. And so if the question on the exam was, discuss the causes of Confederation of Canada in 1867, I could picture in my mind the 4 or 5 pages of that book, the textbook describing that, and I quickly scribbled them down and then on to the next question, did very well. Well, flash forward, it was a course taught by a wonderful professor by the name of Donald Fleming, American Intellectual History. We didn't have a book. We didn't have a single treatise. We didn't have numbers of treatises. For each week, there'd be 5 or 6 or 7 different writings ranging from 25 pages to 200 pages. And so I think around about 5th week, it was the U.S. Civil War. I carefully read the 6 readings. I took notes on each of them. I then did my little summary 3x5 index card on each of the 6 readings, and I put the summary cards side by each in my desk. And guess what? Each one was different. That was a matter of great consternation to me. And so, in my distress, I went to Professor Fleming. This was a class of 1,000 students. And after class, I managed to get a few seconds with him, and I said, "Here's my dilemma, sir. I've done my summary of each of the 6 readings. I've done the summary card. I've looked at them. Each one is different. Which one is the truth?" Now, he could have said to me, "My, oh my, where did you come from to have to ask a question like that?" He didn't. He put his arm around my shoulder, and he whispered in my ear so the other kids wouldn't hear, "Maybe none of them." and the light went on. In my installation speech on October 1st, I said, if you remember nothing of what I say to you today, remember 3 words: cherish our teachers. And I quoted only one story of the 100 or 200 teachers who have been so influential in my life. And it was another great figure in my time at Harvard. As Roseanne indicated, I played hockey there and loved the game, love it today. The hockey coach was one of those great teachers. His name was Cooney Weiland. He had a grade 10 education from Seaforth, Ontario, and he taught us the beautiful game of hockey, and he taught us the beautiful game of life. When Cooney died, it fell to my lot to be one of the people giving a eulogy for him in Memorial Church, the chapel at Harvard University that seats about 500, was filled to overflowing. Half or so were old hockey players, the other half were Harvard professors. And I remember saying, when the history of our civilization is written in 100 years' time, historians will look upon this institution as being one of the most powerful instruments for good in our society. Why is that so? It's because of outstanding teachers, the hockey coach, and we honor one today, Cooney Weiland. This was a teacher who taught us so much. Another one, and I'll end with this story with respect to learning, was George Wald. George Wald was on Time magazine as one of the great teachers in the United States, I think in 1964. He was also a great researcher. He won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for this chemistry of vision, how the eye sees. And he taught a course, again, it was 1,000 students. Non-science majors were all required to take a science course, and I loved that science course that George Wald taught. The reason there were only 1,000 students in the class is because that was the largest classroom. There wasn't room for any more. It was very popular. One morning he came in about halfway through the course. He says, this was a very important day in my life. As a matter of fact, I was only a few years older than you, and I actually contemplated taking my own life out of despair, out of closed-mindedness. He said, I'd been told from the time I was very small that I was prodigy, I was very bright, things came easily to me. I concentrated on biology and then biochemistry and then the eye and then a particular mechanism in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't conquer it. I could not figure it out. I couldn't discover, quote, the truth. And I worked for about a year on my experiment, and I seemed to be getting nowhere, and so despondent was I that one night I was in my apartment and I was very worried about my own safety. So I got out of bed and I went back to my laboratory as a kind of safe refuge. There were no lights on, but as I came in through the corridor, the fire fire signal lights were on to provide a minimum of éclairage, of lighting, and I put my key up to the door of my laboratory to open it, and there was a light inside that kept the experiments lighted. And I could see my experiment over there in the corner, which had been such frustration to me. And I turned to the other side of the room where there was another experiment on a totally different science project in a totally different branch of science. And when I began to try to figure out that, I looked at my experiment from a totally different angle. And all of a sudden, I began to see it in a different way, like that jar which was empty or full that I mentioned at the outset. And from that, it led me to the discovery that ultimately won me a Nobel Prize for discovering how the eye sees. And the reason I'm here today, he said, teaching you bright young people who are not science majors, it's important for you to know a good deal about science. And it's important for you to know a good deal about things beyond your own discipline. That's keeping the mind open. It was very influential on me. My writing tends to be in 2 areas, broadly speaking, economic regulation, and broadly speaking, science, technology, and law, information technology, communication law, things of that sort. And it's those lessons from George Wald about form following function, as opposed to function following form, as opposed to form following function, that have guided my writings in law, because you look at how things function and then you try to ensure that the law provides an appropriate ordering around it, as opposed to the law stifling innovation. Let me just say 2 other things. One about volunteering and thinking beyond yourself. The world is a pretty lonely place if you're the only important person in it. Discover your communities, help those in need. Roseanne told you a lovely story about people who came together here and around volunteering established wonderful friendships. Philanthropy and volunteerism is one of the things we're stressing so much for the smart and caring nation I referred to about earlier. Let me tell you a story about volunteerism in an unusual fashion. My wife and I live on a farm in Waterloo, about 11 minutes drive from our university. 100 acres of the farm. Our neighbors are all Mennonite. They're horse and buggy people. They make very careful choices about what technology they use and they don't use. And so cars and trucks are not important to them, but tractors are. Our neighbor, Mennonite neighbor that looks after our farm, Edgar Shantz, has his own 100-acre farm. He looks after ours and a couple of others, 3 tractors, always busy, a wonderful, wonderful guy. One day I was on the tractor, and bear in mind the Mennonites have unusual costumes. The women always wear bonnets and long dresses. The men always have hats on their heads, long shirts, etc. Are very separate in terms of some of the things they do. I was on the tractor with Edgar one day, and he had his sleeve rolled up, and he had a little Band-Aid just over this part of his elbow. I said, Edgar, you didn't cut yourself. Is that a Band-Aid from donating blood? And he says, yeah. I said, you donate blood? He says, yes. I said, how many units have you given? He said, 183. I said, Edgar, that's impossible. You can only donate blood every 6 months. You're about 52, 53. You haven't had enough years to do that. He says, no. He says, you can donate blood every 57th day. So every 57th day, he hitches his horse and buggy, and he goes from our little community 6 miles away to Elmira, gives blood, and comes back. And if the 57th day is a Sunday, then he goes on the 58th day. He's never missed. Now, we think of the Mennonite people as being very close. That blood goes to anyone in Canada, perhaps anyone in the world, to save lives, to help people. And it's interesting, Canada, I believe, is the only nation where you're not paid to donate blood and you're not charged to receive it. What a remarkable tribute to a nation that does that. And here's my Mennonite neighbor who would be seen to be in a very closed community. He's involved in the most open community of volunteerism in the world. There's a lovely footnote to that story. I just learned it a week ago. My wife and I were back in Waterloo, and we were with Edgar, and he's just suffered from colon cancer and had a very large section of his colon removed, and because they got it early enough, his life has been saved. And he was talking a little bit about the operation and saying how grateful he is to the Canadian health system. And Mennonites don't participate directly in Canadian health. When they go to the hospital, they actually pay directly. They don't accept insurance. He said, the reason I got to the hospital is I was going to give blood one day, and they tested my blood, and they said, we can't take it. You're low in iron. You should go and see your doctor. So he said, my reaction was, go and see your doctor, low in iron, I'll eat more raisins or something like that. But then when he went back again, they said, we can't take your blood because of this insufficiency. Go and see your doctor. So he said, I went to see the doctor because I wanted to be able to give blood. The doctor began checking out this low iron, and it led him to discover that I had colon cancer, and they got it in time, and my life is saved. Now, it's not always that you get a reward for your volunteerism, but that was a lovely little footnote to that story. Let me finish with the comment about innovation. Think and dream big, and don't forget about that word dream. Canada's future will depend on how well we conceive and implement new ideas, concepts, and technologies, not simply in the technological sphere, but that's important, but also in the social sphere. Be social innovators. How do we get that esprit, that culture of donating blood in this country to transcend into so many other areas? And there's a place for young people in that. In fact, I'm going to tell 2 stories, and then I'll finish, Rosanna. I was only going to tell 1, but I'm going to tell 2, because the word culture is important. The first story is that there is a room for everybody, and especially room for young minds and innovation. I love to illustrate that by one of my favorite swords into plowshares stories. You know that wonderful biblical phrase, they shall turn their swords into plowshares? It has a great symbolism to it. Well, this swords and plowshares story goes back to 1957. What was the big event in 1957? It was Sputnik, eh? The Russians put up a rocket, a satellite, first in outer space. President Eisenhower responded with 2 major decisions. One was to put America back on the track of winning the game in space, which ultimately led to the man on the moon. The second was less known, but it was DARPANET, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency Network. President Eisenhower was concerned that if an atomic or later a hydrogen bomb fell on Washington or New York, the communications between those cities would be cut out, and America's power decision-making would be totally eliminated. So he wanted a spider web of communications, a spider web network, so that if there was a bomb dropped in one center, there still would be communication through another route to Colorado Springs, to Alert in the north of Canada, to the various commanding bases, so that a bomb in 1 or 2 places would not destroy a communication line. It would have the flexibility or resilience that you see in a spider web with many paths. And at great expense, they built this spider web. And there it was, hoping it would never have to be used, because only in the case of a bomb, World War III, under the control of the Department of National Defense, the most controlling agency you can imagine, totally confidential, and not being used. Well, having put this money into the D&D, people said, why don't we use it for our own communications? It's faster than anything else, and it's totally confidential, so they did. And then they had scientists doing classified work. They had them use it. And then those scientists, being bright people, said, well, why don't we have our non-classified information going back and forth there? It's a lot faster, et cetera. And then what happened? They made the mistake of putting it in the hands of their graduate students. Now, not many of you here are yet graduate students, but let me tell you, graduate students are the most irrepressible, creative, enlightened, enthusiastic, imaginative people in the world, and they gave birth to the internet. Now, they had a little help from Tim Berners-Lee, a European scientist at CERN, that developed the protocol, but it was that exuberance of graduate students of young minds that took this new communication technology and made it work around the world. And now, the internet, it took the printing press over 3 centuries, in the 16th and 17th, 18th century Europe, to reach a majority of the population, a new form of communication. It took the internet less than a decade to reach a majority of the world. Remarkable how quickly that has penetrated us and how young minds have been so important to it. The story about culture and innovation and caring is one I love to tell, and I'll finish with this. It's a Mother Teresa story. One year when Mother Teresa was alive, she came to speak at the Greater Montreal Prayer Breakfast, and a group of 50 or so of us gathered afterwards, and one of our neighbors said to her, Mother Teresa, we're so moved by your work in India. What can we do to help? And I thought that she would say, well, send a large donation to my orphanage in Calcutta, India, and it'll be used well. She said, look around you. Look in your own family. Look in your own neighborhood. I guarantee you that there's someone who needs your love and care. Start there. So that was her statement. Her speech was criticized by, in some quarters, in an editorial that was quite strong in this, by saying, it's a wonderful woman, probably going to be a saint as she was, but let's be practical. She looks after 250 people in an orphanage and a settlement house in Calcutta, India, a city of 25 million people, over half of whom are living in the greatest poverty imaginable. It's a drop in the bucket, just a drop in the bucket, just a drop in the ocean. That bothered me for some time, the drop in the bucket, the drop in the ocean, until one day we'd finished a birthday party at our home, and we had 5 daughters in 7 years, so birthday parties were a big deal. At the end of one of the parties, the 2 eldest girls said, Dad, we got something to tell you. You know those ghost stories you tell at the birthday parties, and you told them today? Oh, yeah, I know. Well, they're all lies, you know. The kids know they're all lies. They only pretend to be scared because they don't want to hurt your feelings. Why can't you be magic like Dean McFarlane? Well, Dean McFarlane was Andy McFarlane, who was the Dean of Journalism at Western, and I was the Dean of Law, and had bloody Andy McFarlane. You're not so smart. What do you do? So I went to see a birthday party at the McFarlane household a couple months later, and lo and behold, there's bloody Andy McFarlane, big top hat, cape on, wand, he's got a mustache, falls out to here, and he's prancing around doing magic, and the kids are eating it up. And I watched him carefully. He pulled a glass of water from the top of the desk. He says, I will turn this water into wine. And Andy, you're going too far. 2,000 years ago, that was done with someone with more power than you. And he whirled around, and he reached in his sleeve where the kids couldn't see, and he had a little dropper, and in it was a drop of red vegetable dye coloring. And he dropped that drop in the glass of water, put it out, the kids saw the drop, and then they saw the drop diffusing throughout the water, and it turned the clear liquid into a wonderful shade of rosé, water into wine. And I thought, that's Mother Teresa's drop of water. And I've been thinking it, my mind being closed, as a matter of physics, of volume in a glass as opposed to a chemical reaction of how that red molecule interacted with the H2O molecules in the jar and suffused them to turn them color. I should have not been looking at it as physics. I should have looked at it as chemistry, because that one drop changed the entire culture. And it's that change of culture that is so essential to the smart and caring nation. Let me just leave you with 2 lines, my favorite 2 lines from George Bernard Shaw that I hope you remember in your journey through Carleton here. They are, some people see things as they are and wonder why. We dream of things that ought to be and ask, why not? Merci.